Milind, before we start, do you want to address the audience and say a few words? And
Thank you. Very good morning to each and every one of you. Let me first begin, Shri, by thanking you for agreeing to have this fireside chat with me. I'm very grateful to Krishnan, to my friend Chandrasen Hada for inviting me here today to be with you with the Abu Dhabi chapter of the Chartered Accountants ICAI. And prior to us coming up, my friend Mohammed, when he was presenting the video about chartered accountants and the core team of the Abu Dhabi chapter, he said, we CAs are not very creative people. And I said to a few people as a joke that where I'm from in South Mumbai, if you go to the income tax office, they'll tell you the most creative people are chartered accountants. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And one thing that I would say, before we get into whatever questions, Sri, you want me to answer, is that there are few institutions in our country that really produce the next generation of managers, leaders. For instance, the armed forces. You take someone from the armed forces, once they've retired, any veteran, they make the best administrators, the best managers, the best leaders. And I think one of the institutions in our country, in India and globally, that we can be extremely proud of are chartered accountants.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.
Wherever I go, whichever country, when I meet a chartered accountant who's come from ICAI, they excel in each and everything they do, even if it's not accounting or being creative in the income tax office. So it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. A big thanks to Chandra, as you said, in fact, for getting you here. Your Instagram post yesterday read, rain or shine, Abu Dhabi, here I come. So that's the energy that you bring to the table. So big round of applause to Milind. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Milind, you were one of the youngest members of parliament at the age 27. You were a former union minister. You handled two portfolios, shipping, information and technology, during Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's tenure. You continue to be a prominent member of parliament. But I want to take you back. I want to indulge for a minute. If I take you back in a time capsule to Boston University. So as a terrier, that is what you guys are called. The alumni is called a terrier. I was researching, in fact, who are the other notable terriers. One name which absolutely came up was Martin Luther King Jr. And his most notable speech is, I Have a Dream, which is a fantastic segue to today's topic, actually, which is from vision to reality, the progressive India. So when you stepped out, that young 20-odd years, basically, what was your dream or vision for a progressive India? And what is it today, from then to now? And what do you think further requires to be done in this, as Prime Minister calls it, the Amrit Kal?
Well, firstly, a little background about myself. I grew up in Mumbai. I did my undergrad in the US. It was very clear to me that I would never get into politics. My late father was a businessman. He set up one of the first plastics packaging companies in the country. And he got into politics in 1968. But we were really raised, my brother and I, to come back, run the family business. For me, Shri, when I grew up in India and I went to the US and I returned, I was really driven by wanting to do something for society. And as someone who had dreams even before I became a politician at the age of 27, I genuinely felt, I remember meeting Rajat Gupta at the time, who had become the global CEO of McKinsey and Company.
Yeah.
And I could see that Indians in the United States, in Europe, were excelling. And that brain drain that was happening, and today we see that in every large tech company, from Google to Microsoft. The question that was always in my head is that why is it that the brightest Indians choose to leave India when they should be back in India and contributing to the country's growth and progress? So that was really my motivating factor. And I can tell you that in 20 years of being in active politics, it was 20 years ago that I first entered parliament. frankly, a lot has changed. And today, I think in terms of infrastructure, whether we talk of physical infrastructure, whether we talk of human resource infrastructure, whether we talk of digital infrastructure, I was hearing the presentation from Apurva a while ago, and clearly he has created a niche. He's invested in the large companies, but you've also created a niche by investing in companies that are solving very local problems, very indigenous problems. And to me, that opportunity is now for us. You know, one statistic which blows my mind, and I speak about this in Parliament very often, the UPI platform. Does everyone know about UPI? The UPI digital platform, which again solved a local problem. It did away with cash. It's moving to promote India into a cashless society. In the month, December 2024, in 1 month, UPI recorded almost 17 billion transactions. Can you imagine? So I think now we've reached a stage where that young Milind Deora who came back to India 25 years ago, sees that there are more opportunities for a young Indian to be in India rather than go overseas.
Understand. Thank you. Thank you. Going back to your tenure as the Minister of Information and Technology, according to you, what role technology and innovation has and will continue to play in the progressive India?
You know,
you just spoke about UPI, by the way.
Yeah, see, I was a minister almost 12 years ago.
Right.
At that time, the internet, the digital landscape looked very different. Firstly, the debate in the government was, should we follow the American model, the Western model of having a free internet? Should we follow the Chinese model of having a firewall and developing indigenous companies? We chose to be a free internet society. That in some ways has helped us, enabled us. It also gave a country like China a head start. But I think one area which I was very proud to lead, which UPI is a small part of, I was heading the National E-Governance Plan of the Government of India. And, you know, I was talking to a gentleman just now who was sitting next to me, and even Mr. Krishnan told me when we were talking about the Anna Hazare political movement.
Yeah.
And for those who don't remember, I'm just getting into little politics now, but 10, 12 years ago, the movement was called the Lokpal Bill. And what the Lokpal Bill envisioned was that the bureaucracy in India is corrupt. Let's create another parallel bureaucracy called the Lokpal, which will oversee this corrupt bureaucracy. And I remember asking myself as a minister of IT who was heading the National E-Governance Plan, that what's the guarantee that 10 years later we won't create a third or fourth layer of bureaucracy because that bureaucracy has been corrupt. And then the answer that came to my mind is that if you really want to eliminate corruption in India, it's not by adding more layers of bureaucracy and government between the citizen and the government. It's actually by reducing them. It's by reducing the amount of government and the interface between the citizen and governance. And that's the vision with which we implemented e-governance in our country. And I'm very glad to say that this is one issue which transcends politics, it transcends governments, regardless of which individual is prime minister, regardless of which party or alliance is leading India. The e-governance thrust, of which UPI is a significant part, is moving at a very fast speed. One project that I was very proud to implement, for those who had the misfortune of having to renew their passport in India 20 years ago, or having to get more pages in their passport. It was the biggest nuisance on the planet.
I can relate to that, by the way.
You must have experienced it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, as an MP, people used to come to me and say, can you please write a letter to the passport officer? If they were able to reach me, I would make a call. If the passport officer would meet them, he would implement and renew their passport. And I thought about the idea, and the ministry officials, that how do we disintermediate this process? how do we reduce the discretion that a bureaucrat or a politician has to provide a basic service? And one of the first projects that we implemented as part of the National E-Governance Plan was Passport Seva Kendra. And we brought TCS, the Tata Consultancy Services, as a partner, created a public-private partnership where if you're a citizen who wants their passport renewed within a stipulated time frame without having to go to your MP, to the passport officer, through the interface of the private sector, your passport gets renewed within a stipulated period of time. And that issue is completely resolved. Another issue we implemented, for instance, with e-governance plan was the e-filing of income tax returns. It also made it very, very easy for people to go in. So I think these are the kind of reforms we need in some ways. And in fact, Shri, these are the reforms that not just India, but even the developed world is talking about today. The DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, announced by Donald Trump, which is headed by Elon Musk. There are many aspects to that. One is to reduce bureaucracy, to reduce the interface between citizen and government. Two is to disinvest sectors that the government should not be running. So I think in many ways, as much as we give India a lot of flack, and we sometimes criticize the political class, the bureaucratic class, we say things are not moving as quickly. In many ways, when it comes to e-governance, when it comes to digital transactions, I think we are miles and miles and many decades ahead of countries like the Europe and the US. In terms of having privacy and security embedded into this digital interface, we're even years ahead of countries like China. So there's a lot that India has achieved in the last 15 to 20 years using technology as a platform. And I'm very glad that I had the opportunity as a IT minister to play a small role in implementing some of these initiatives.
Wonderful. Thank you. Milind, talking about what more I can relate to, and you have made a significant contribution to the political landscape. I want to go to the infrastructure landscape. And as a fellow Mumbaiker, I've not only witnessed, I have actually enjoyed the fruits of some of the infrastructure development that you have personally championed and advocated. Now, so that I don't really miss out anything notable, these are notable amongst them, are the Eastern Freeway, the Atal Setu, the Bandra Worli ceiling, the stormwater drainage, cluster development, Mumbai Metro. My question to you is, what are your thoughts on the current state? You mentioned earlier in some thing that you were more on the urban side and not the rural side. So urban infrastructure, the state of urban infra, what more needs to be done so that we go back to the topic of taking India towards that progressive India?
Look, for those who come from Mumbai, I mean, one big disadvantage we've had for a long time. One of the reasons, Shri, that the National Capital Region territory, in my opinion, did exceedingly well and actually became the strongest urban contributor to the national exchequer, more than Bengaluru, more than Chennai, more than Hyderabad, much more than Mumbai, was really because there were 4 state governments competing for the NCR pie. There was Delhi, there was Uttar Pradesh with Noida, there was Haryana with Gurgaon, and to some extent Rajasthan. The Mumbai metropolitan pie all came under the Maharashtra government. So we had to essentially compete with ourselves. Today, I think the entire region has been reimagined. And the larger Mumbai metropolitan region, which really was from Thane to South Mumbai, today has extended all the way to Alibag. It's gone up to Palghar. In the region now, for instance, the largest port in the country, the Vadhavan port, will be in Palghar. We will have north to south connectivity by road and by metro from South Mumbai in Kolaba all the way to Palghar. We will have east-west connectivity where from the current Mumbai airport to the Navi Mumbai airport, you can reach in a metro in less than 20 minutes.
Wonderful.
We have the Atal Setu, which is the longest sea bridge in the country. And I think that by the time this vision is completed, maybe in about 7 years' time, We will have 4 major ports in the larger Mumbai metropolitan region. We will have 3 major airports. And that is the vision that we need for a region like us. If you look at the New York region, you have 3 major airports. You have many small airports. You have the Brooklyn Bridge,
Yeah.
which I used to quote 20 years ago, which was built in 1885 to decongest Manhattan and spread that congestion to Queens, Brooklyn. And
Bronx.
that's the same vision with which we've implemented the Atal Setu project. So I'm very hopeful that the Mumbai metropolitan region will be one of the biggest economic growth engines, not just for Maharashtra, but I believe for India. And if we add another layer on top of that, which is we add the layer of international financial center, like you have in the Middle East and the Gulf countries, then you're not just competing against Delhi or Bengaluru or Chennai or Hyderabad, but then with due respect, we can compete against Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Singapore. And that is the vision that we are trying to bring to how the center, state, local bodies work. But look, India's urban story is a very complicated story. One is there is very little political buy-in to India's urban story. I can tell you as someone who's been in parliament for a long time, the main thrust of the debates are on rural areas, and we have to improve rural areas. 60% of our country still, of our population still lives in rural areas. Agriculture, income, productivity is essential. But there's very little political interest given to urban areas and to urban development. And this is something which I think is beginning to change. It's something which has to change. And we have to be very careful in how we plan for cities. A country like China expanded very quickly. And because of that, today they have almost 30 ghost cities that no one lives in. Because of that, they have companies like Evergrande that are completely bankrupt. And that's put a huge strain on their banking system. So we need to ensure that infrastructure precedes development, but not to the extent where you have overcapacity. And I can see that beginning to happen. I can see that the urban growth engine of India is becoming far more robust than it was 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago.
Wonderful. So, we are both fellow Mumbaikars actually. So, when I used to work in Mumbai, so it was South Bombay. In fact, Fort used to be my office area and the area I used to live in. Infrastructure today has totally changed. Is MMR the model or the template for other urban clusters within India?
Not necessarily. Not
Okay.
necessarily. I think every cluster brings different
Right.
opportunities. Look, basically, the reason India failed and the reason India's cities did very poorly and the reason we have massive traffic congestion, housing problems where there are slums, there's not enough affordable housing, is essentially we didn't build satellite towns. The model for urban governance and for urban development is really in any city around the world. You need many small towns. That's essentially what absorbs the congestion. Another big problem in our cities is urban local governance is very weak. So if you look at a country like the US has 3 tiers of government. You have the central government, you have the state government, and then you have local government. When something goes wrong in New York City, there's a terror attack, there's flooding, people look at the mayor. People in India, whether you're from Mumbai, whether you're from Chennai, whether you're from Bangalore, people don't know who the mayor is.
Yeah.
So you need to give the mayors more power, the mayors more authority, and that will ensure that you have stronger urban, local self-governance. My vision is that ultimately we should have a system where the mayors of cities, large cities, tier 2 cities, should be more powerful than the chief ministers of that state. They should control law and order. They should control housing. They should control sanitation. So those are the kind of reforms we need. We're still a long way away from that. But as I said, we need more political focus to draw the government's attention towards these things.
Let's shift our focus to social reforms now. So President Jimmy Carter once said, quote, "The test of a government is not how popular you are with the powerful or the privileged, but honestly and fairly how you deal with many who must depend on you." So what are your thoughts on the government's role on inclusivity, social justice for all sections of society?
Look, I think India is going through a very unique debate right now. And one issue that we are confronted by is that there is a lot of political competition between parties as to who can offer. I want to be careful about the word I use. You know, if party A during an election says, I will give the citizen 1,500 rupees per month, the other party will say, I'll give you 1,800 rupees. The third party will say, I'll give you 2,000 rupees per month. This is politically prudent, but it raises fiscal questions. Is it the right model for India? To some extent, one can understand during a crisis like COVID, as a stimulus, you give people money in their hands. But there is a risk that by doing so, are you encouraging people to work or are you encouraging people to get off work? And that's a serious debate that needs to be had. Because the election cycle, Shri, in India happens so often, every 6 months we have an election. And because an election is happening every 6 months, it's very hard for the political class to put these issues aside and say, let's pick them up after 5 years.
Got it.
And these are things that worry me going forward. Because in Maharashtra, for instance, we implemented a scheme called the Ladki Behan scheme, where we give needy women 1,500 rupees per month. Certainly people are benefiting from it. I've seen firsthand a lot of women who have, I've met women in Mumbai, in Maharashtra, who, I met a woman, I remember, whose child was handicapped. She lost her husband. She can't take care of her family. But because of that money, she's been able to set up a small stall and earn income. So it's hugely empowering for those kind of women. But at the same time, there are some people who may not need that and are taking undue advantage of that scheme. It also raises a question as to, do you have enough money then to invest in infrastructure? And where should a government put their money, their taxpayer dollars, to get the best bang for the buck? So this debate needs to happen in India. I think that because of the continuous cycle of elections, it's becoming very, very hard for politicians to address the elephant in the room. One good reform that the government has proposed is a reform called One Nation, One Election. And if that truly gets implemented and executed, where you have a limited tenure of 5 years for a state government, for the central government, regardless of what political maneuvering happens in those 5 years, that government completes its term and there will not be elections. I think that will give politicians across parties and across governments in India the legroom to take harsh decisions that are in India's long-term interest.
Thank you. My next few questions, Milind, are all coming back into the time capsule to today and looking back in your rear view window and reflections on your journey. So my first question on reflections is, can you share a pivotal moment in your political career which significantly shaped your dream stroke vision for India's being progressive India?
You know, frankly, Shri, I grew up, as I said, in a family where my father saw politics as social service. He wasn't in politics to perpetuate a certain identity. He really saw politics as an extension of social work and of philanthropy. I can only tell you one experience is that when I came back to India in 2000, my father, with the support of Bill Gates in '97, had started India's and probably Southeast Asia's first free digital literacy program. At that time, Bill Gates donated about $6 million to the Bharati Vidya Bhavan. My father was closely associated with it. And they took digital centers. Essentially, digital centers meant a computer, desktop, your keyboards, your CPU, mouse, all of that, to centers around the country. And I came back as the South Mumbai kid, thinking that South Mumbai won't need this.
Right.
We have the best schools. We are the richest constituency out of 545 constituencies in the country. And literally right down from where I live in Malabar Hill, right down the road, I saw schools that were government schools, state government aided schools, municipal schools, where in 2000, 2001, the schools didn't have money for blackboards, for chalk, for a duster. Forget about implementing the government's IT policy of having computers.
Oh.
And I just thought to myself that I'm so privileged to live in a city which is the financial center of the country. And I went to friends who run some of the top companies in the country. And I said, you know, when you're throwing away all these computers, and for some of us who are above the age of 40 years, we know what a Pentium compute chip was and a 486 was. And as these would become redundant, I said, just give me these old computers. And I went to these schools and I said, give me a room and I will build a computer center for you free of cost. And we expanded this to create a digital literacy program. And we ensured that Mumbai and the greater Mumbai district became the first district in the country that had 100% digital literacy.
Right.
Especially among the weaker sections of society who couldn't afford it. And that's when I think that extension of my father's idea of politics, where, you know, you talked about Martin Luther King. He said something once, and he said that leadership is not about choosing sides. It's about bringing sides together. And that to me has been the basic ethos of politics. And I would like to actually even rise above Mumbai and economic issues. But in today's world, whether it's India, whether it's the US, we see politics is very divided. There was a time where you could have a political discussion with your family and friends, and no one would care. Today, sometimes political conversations with family and friends turns to fights. People don't talk to family members.
Correct.
They don't want to be friends with you anymore because of your political views. And that shows how divided we have become. And slightly moving to a little spiritual level, you know, the famous Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was one of the proponents of transcendental meditation, he said something very beautiful. And he said, for a forest to be green, every tree must be green. And what that means is if you want to change the environment around you, you want to change people's attitudes towards politics, first change yourself.
Understand.
And I think that is today needed in politics. Because our systems, our institutions in India, anywhere in the world, any parliamentary democracy, were built to have divisions, but to bring people together and say that for the greater good, let's pass a legislation. And that's how great legislations which have transformed India got passed. The insurance bill, which allowed for private sector in insurance. My father, as the chairman of the finance committee, worked with Yashwant Sinha, finance minister of India, 2 different parties, got it passed. GST, government, party in power, party in the opposition worked together to enact a huge reform for India, which made India more competitive globally. Today, the nuclear sector. Today, India is about to open its nuclear sector to private participation. As of now, as the law stands, nuclear energy in India can only be generated by the government. And this is another example, the nuclear sector, which has seen across parties, across prime ministers, from Indira Gandhi to Atal Bihari Vajpayee to Dr. Manmohan Singh and now to Narendra Modi, who have worked unitedly and sent a message to the world that when it comes to our sovereignty, when it comes to India being a responsible nuclear power, India speaks in one voice.
Wonderful.
And I think those That style of leadership, that style of politics is essential, not just for India, but for the world. Because I think when we look at how divided the world is, how divided Western democracies are in terms of their politics, we see what's happening between Ukraine and Russia. We see what's happening in the Middle East. I really believe, Shri, that India, because of its spiritual, philosophical tradition, has the diplomatic, the philosophical means to move the world towards peace. So if we are able to demonstrate that domestically, the world will take notice. And for global problems, India will become the solution.
Super. Milind, you just spoke about style of leadership, and learning starts at home. You had a fantastic person in your dad and your mom, who was a notable sportswoman, in fact. So, yes, please talk about them and how did they shape the style of leadership that we see today in you. But other than your parents, who else were your key influences or mentors in your journey?
You know, I would say my mother, you're right, she's a national level bridge player. I'm not sure if she's a sports person, but she's won a medal in the Asian Games for India. So I'm very proud of what she's achieved as well. And you'll be surprised if I answer this question honestly.
Okay.
A lot of my heroes are not, and my icons are not politicians.
Which is okay.
They are actually musicians.
Oh, wow.
And I learn a lot about politics. I learn a lot about people. I learn a lot about working together, teamwork, from musicians. And I say this as a guitar player and a musician myself. I think the dynamics between a band have more lessons in them for leadership, for governance, for bridging divides, for suppressing egos, for the greater good than politicians do. So my heroes are mainly musicians.
Okay.
But I think that, I don't want to sound cliche, but I really believe today when I travel around the length and breadth of the country and I meet young people, many of whom, venture capital funds like Apurva are investing in, who come from very, very humble backgrounds. Financial backgrounds, very, very humble backgrounds, very limited education, but have brilliant ideas to solve very indigenous Indian problems. I truly believe these people, if they're given the right platform, the right backing, the right government support, the right financial support, are far more disruptive and innovative than the Elon Musks of the world. I really believe that. They may not be able to speak in Silicon Valley English and use those technical terms. I don't know if you agree with me or not. But their ability to analyze a problem, to find an Indian solution to that problem, is unprecedented. I mean, a very small example. Of course, Bhavesh Agarwal, my friend who developed Ola, few innovations compared to Uber. The fact that Uber said you can only book the taxi on your app. He said you can also book it on the phone. Uber said you can only pay on your credit card. He said in India, people like to pay cash.
Correct.
Just few innovations.
Yeah.
And it transformed the market completely. So Indians are very good at those things. Indians are very good at also adopting global technologies, making it Indic. And I think those areas are where we can really develop platforms of the future that can compete with the US and China. I also believe that, when we talk of technology, today the war that's happening, I wouldn't say a war, but the competition between America and China on many technologies. Today the current technologies are, robotics, drones, defense. The future technologies will be quantum computing, nuclear fusion, not nuclear fission, space exploration, deep drilling. I think artificial intelligence, India has to choose its niches and develop those niches where it's neither on China's radar or it's neither on America's radar. And I think those niches will allow India to catapult in the next 10 years, 20 years and become a leader in those technologies.
Wonderful. I think you've already spoken about the next one. In fact, I just want, you spoke about reinvention. And in one of, I was just going through some of your recent speeches. And in one of your recent speeches, I think this was to Think School Ganesh. And Ganesh was one of the speakers, by the way, a couple of years back at the seminar here. Think School?
Okay, yes.
Yeah? So you talk of reinventing oneself as individuals and as government. And more importantly, it was reimagine and rethink, to quote your words. The conceptual reference, in fact, in your speech was to Mumbai, and you just spoke about competing with Dubai, Abu Dhabi. This was exactly the contextual reference that you used in your speech, saying our benchmarking to rethink about Mumbai should be very different. Most of us here, almost all of us here, can relate to that because we all work in corporates, and in corporates, all these terms are there. You yourself are an MBA. So talk to us more from your vantage point as a policy maker and as government, rethinking, reimagining, all these are, at least for me, foreign for a policy maker. So where does that come from?
See, the first thing when you enter politics
Yeah.
is you have to forget all your private sector experience. Because the idea of, processes,
Yeah,
you put in so much input and you expect so much output.
right.
These things don't work in politics.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to realize that, and a lot of frustration in the early days of my political career. Because I came back thinking, let's put these systems in place.
Right.
And then you would put those systems in place, and within 1 month, those systems would fall apart. Policy making and implementing policies. Firstly, there are two big differences between making a policy and implementing a policy. But at the heart of it is understanding politics. And I think in politics, the first lesson is being ready and comfortable to just go with the flow. But yet having a direction. So in business, typically, if you say, I want to reach the end of the room, you say, I will mark out the path and it should go this way. And when it diverges a bit, you can always bring it back. In politics, you have to be ready that the path to get to the end of the room will be here, there, out of that door, back from that door, come here, and then you reach the end of the room. The only thing you have to try to do is to ensure that you speed it up. And that also is now facing a lot of disruptions. Now, if you look at Donald Trump's style of leadership, it's a very unpredictable style of leadership. It's something which, frankly, the world has never seen. You announce a tariff on Mexico, and the next day you withdraw that tariff on Mexico. You 1 minute say, I'm putting pressure on Russia to stop the war. The next day you call Zelensky of Ukraine a dictator. But that's how politics has become. And that's the nature of my profession today. There was a time when politics was also very, very predictable. You knew that it won't be a straight line, but you knew that it will be a zigzag line. Today it can be in any direction. And today it's become multi-dimensional. It's no longer 2D or 3D. So I think, for policy makers, for politicians, for people in government, for bureaucracy, we live in a very rapidly changing world. And just like the private sector, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a finance professional, whether you work in a technology company, you are facing disruptions in your industry. You have to think about in 5 years, 10 years, whether your profession, whether your job will be completely disrupted or not. I think in the same way, we as politicians have to think about our own jobs. And when I say job, I'm not talking about career preservation. But what will the nature of democracy look like? The nature of democracy is being disrupted. So I would only say that, in a world which is so rapidly changing, be flexible, learn to adapt, learn to improvise, and learn to overcome. Adapt, improvise, overcome.
Wonderful.
That's the mantra to face the disruptions of today.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I hand it over to the audience, and I'm sure the audience is extremely eager to ask you questions, Milind, I just have one last question. sitting now, telling that 22-year-old, what is that piece of advice you would give to the young Milind and why?
What advice would I give to?
What advice would you give to your 22-year-old?
I would actually, Shri, do the opposite.
Okay?
I would take advice from that 22-year-old. I think that 22-year-old has more advice. And look, let's be honest. When you're young,
Yeah,
you actually know more
yeah,
about who you are. As you get older and you accumulate baggage, you forget the core value of and your ideals and why you are doing what you're doing. So I actually reflect on that young 22-year-old who agreed to enter this profession of public life, not even politics, even before politics, with that same idealism, that same degree of, as we say in Hindi, bhulapan, not sure which way it will turn out. And that 22-year-old knew Milind better than the 48-year-old Milind knows him. So I would learn more from
thank you.
that person than the other way around.
Wonderful, yeah, thank you. Oh, big round of applause to Milind. Turn it over to the audience. If anyone has questions, please. You can see a hand go up there. A couple of back benches. Please. Can someone pass a mic, please?
Thank you, Milindji. It was a good, reflecting your, what are the ideas you have implemented and how you have done. One quick thing I just want to ask you, when we have been talking about the Ola, Uber and other things, it just came to my mind today what is happening. They're taking about 18% of the share from the drivers and things which has been happening, which is affecting the drivers who have been using it. And if the government comes with some pack, a sort of a tool, which can be directly be implemented, it can help them more because the profit for them also will be more on that part. Thank you.
There were a couple of back benches I saw, and then somewhere in the middle.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon. I think it was really amazing to listen to you. One question. Growing up, I always thought that politics is all about, being older, 40 years and above, then we enter the politics. With an experience, people vote for you. But after I saw you, long back, 10 years back when I was in Bombay doing my CA, I thought, there is a chance that somebody like you, young person coming in the politics and completely changing that South Bombay part, So what do you advise people like us, I being 32 years old now, let's say we want to serve country. How do we join a party or how do we enter into some segment where we can contribute politically? So that's my question to you, sir.
I couldn't hear. Can you repeat, please?
There's a problem with the sound.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. Was your question, what should young people like you do?
Yeah, so I mean to say that if let's say a young person like me or somebody like 32 years old want to come in the politics, serve the country, because you started very young at your age. So how do we start?
You can take my job. If you want to enter politics, look, I'll be honest with you. If I was not the son of a well-known politician, there's no way I would have become an MP at 27. So it's unfair that people from a political class are given this undue advantage and a quick path to success. But having said that, we are a minority. A vast majority of people who have succeeded in politics certainly come from no political background. The answer to how can you shape politics does not necessarily mean you have to enter politics. To be very candid with you, entering politics, as I said, is not everyone's cup of tea. It's a very different profession. It's a very difficult profession. It's a demanding profession. Um, it's, it takes up a lot of your personal time. But there are many ways which you can contribute, influence politics beyond being directly involved, joining a party. Chartered accountants like yourself, who are so well traveled, well informed, have so much experience from countries around the world, there is a huge amount of information that resides within each of you. There is a huge amount of information that resides within your associations. Governments allowing that information to pass through to them, allowing that feedback to reach ministry offices is very, very critical. So having some form of lateral entry where young people who have the backgrounds that you have, who can enter government, serve in government, I think is one very effective way where you can determine politics, policy, shape the future of the country. The second way which you can influence politics today, even if you're living in Abu Dhabi, as an Indian citizen who's an NRI, you can vote, you can participate today on social media. And I really believe that the advent of social media has really changed the nature of political participation in India and around the world. You can be sitting anywhere, but you can create enough pressure on the government, on a ministry, on a particular politician to take action. So, and I see this as a politician in the way parties are run. There was a time 20 years, 30 years ago where every political party in India needed its karyakartas to take a leaflet, to go door to door, ring a bell, put that leaflet in someone's home and say, this is who the candidate is, this is what the party is, this is what the policies are, this is what's in the manifesto. Frankly, today, you just need to send a WhatsApp message on 100 groups and that goes viral on its own. That's your karyakarta. So I think the nature of political participation has completely changed. And I would say that's one easy way to participate, to influence. But certainly, more of people like you being advisors to the government, formally, informally, directly, indirectly, would be a huge service for India.
Milind, mindful we are standing between the audience and lunch, but maybe a couple of more questions if there is any further questions. Anyone? Richie? Yeah?
Sorry, in the interest of time, we'll just take this as a last question.
I cannot afford to keep chartered accountants hungry.
No,
The creativity goes down, by the way.
anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Milind, for your enlightened talk. One, question I have, I went back to India after staying here for 45 years, and of course, I pay income tax. In India, only 3% of the people pay income tax. And in many countries, it is nearly 40 to 50% in many Western countries. Why? What is keeping the Indian government back to increase the tax base? Why it is not getting more people involved in paying the taxes? Is it due to poverty or because lack of infrastructure in the government?
Thank you, Mr. D'Souza. Well, number one, 2/3 of our country, of our population that are dependent on the agrarian economy, don't pay income tax. There's no income tax on agricultural income. But the good news is that while the direct tax collections, the number of people paying direct taxes, of which income tax is a part, is very low. I think with the advent of GST, you are seeing a huge shift towards indirect taxes. So people who otherwise are escaping the income tax, direct tax net, have now come under the indirect tax net. And GST revenues are becoming a primary source of revenue for the government of India and then passing it on to state governments. So this is an area where at one level, while you need to increase the tax base, and the way to do that, as we've seen, is when tax rates used to be 90%, you had very, very low compliance. Today now, when you have a corporate tax rate of technically 23%, you're seeing much, much higher compliance. When you see personal income tax rates come down, you see the threshold increase to 12 lakh rupees, you will see greater compliance. But the truth is that a country which has chosen not to tax 2/3 of its population can still bring them under the tax net, not directly, but indirectly through GST.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One last question. Go ahead. Sorry. Ladies. Very. Ladies are there? Okay. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah.
Are you asking the question on their behalf? Okay. You're representing 4 women.
The mic refused. Yeah. Sir, I'm sure my question will be addressing the whole hall over here. Myself, Nishit, I'm also from Mumbai. My question is, with the digital India and the lot of loud spoken about the way we are moving globally on electronic, what keeps the government not to take any action to bring crores of voters who are NRI and can easily be made a part to go in the embassies and cast their votes?
Good question, very good question. My simple answer to you would be the politics of elections and EVMs in India to start with. Forget about NRIs coming to vote through the means of technology.
Yeah.
Even the use of EVMs, unfortunately, is a very subjective debate in our country. So those who, for instance, say EVMs are faulty, they won't blame EVMs when they win an election. But when the election is lost, then there's something to do with EVMs. I think that one thing we have to do, firstly, is lay to rest this debate in our country about our electoral system. There are certain areas, for instance, funding of political parties, electoral funding, which needs a lot of reforms. But today I can say with great confidence, as somebody who travels around the world, sees and studies electoral systems around the world, especially in the developed world, that India has undoubtedly, and as someone who's fought 5 elections, India has the most robust electoral system in the world, and a system that we can be proud of. There's no doubt in my mind that once that debate is laid to rest, we should certainly expand it to people like you, to NRIs, to postal ballots even. Even the fact that somebody who's posted overseas, a government officer has to vote by postal ballot, even that should change using technology. So I see no reason why this should not happen, but the truth is, it's a very hot political debate in the country. And that debate has to be laid to rest once and for all.
I think one last question. Saloni, go ahead. Last, yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the question. As the president of Indian Ladies Association, I would like to know, like the Indian government has done a lot for the Nari Shakti, and many more things are to be done. So I would like to know your thoughts for the women's safety, health, and the women empowerment. Your thoughts for the women's safety, health, and the women empowerment.
I mean, my general view on this is that, I come from a city, and I don't want to be disrespectful to other cities and people who are from other cities. But I'm proud to say we're one of the safest cities in the country and in the world for women.
Agree.
I also believe that when we talk of women's safety in India, it's unfortunate sometimes that there are stray incidents and aberrations that happen. And world over, in certain sections of the international media, India gets a lot of flack for it. In terms of statistics, I think we've come a very, very long way. And from the days where child mortality, from the days where society was structured and the architecture of Indian society was such that women were unequal from men, I think we've come a very long way. And to bring in Shree's point, when you talk of urbanization, one of the big advantages of urbanization is that the minute people move from rural areas to urban areas, is all these patriarchal issues that may exist elsewhere melt away in an urban area. When you come to an urban area, no one cares what your caste is. No one cares what your religion is. When you work, for instance, in the private sector, no one cares what your gender is. So the way to empower women, in my opinion, the way to empower people from lower castes, in my opinion, the way to empower minorities, in my opinion, is not necessarily by giving them certain symbolic gestures, but is really to create infrastructure, is really to create opportunities where automatically society will take care of itself. And honestly, the best example of that world over is right here in the UAE. Right here in the UAE, you can see where you've created the right infrastructure, the right environment, and over here, everyone is equal, regardless of which country you come from, regardless of which community you come from. And that's a very good example for us to take home in India. It's a lot of inspiration that we can learn. That it's not by giving someone a symbolic dole or a handout. It's by essentially government saying, I'm creating an environment where if there is a crime committed against a woman, we know what will happen. We give you the best infrastructure, we give you the best regulatory environment that facilitates a robust business environment, and then things take care of itself. So I'm a big believer in that, and I think that sometimes the politics is misguided by saying, let's do this for this community, let's do that for that community, but we're actually, in a sense, not really empowering anyone.
Thank you so much, Milind. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Big round of applause, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much to our chief guest, Mr. Milind Deora, Member of Parliament, and to our moderator, CA Sridhar sir. Can you please stay back, sirs? We have something for you. Thank you so much. I know we are all hungry. Yes. We're just going to take 2 minutes and then we're going to have a delicious lunch. Bon appetit in advance. But before that, we have to honor these respected gentlemen, these dignitaries, and it is an absolute honor. So to do the honors, to give a special memento expressing our sincere thanks and gratitude, may I request ICAI Abu Dhabi Chapter's respected Chairman, CA Krishnan sir, and Vice Chairman, CA Rohit sir, to please join us on stage along with CA Chandrasen Hadda. And I request Milind sir to kindly accept the same. We all enjoyed this session, right? So now it's time to show our respect and admiration with a loud round of applause. Thank you, sir. Thanks so much. And now to give a memento to our moderator for this session, Vision to Reality, Building a Progressive India, is CA Sridhar Iyengar, sir. May I request CA Sridhar, sir, to please join us on stage. The CFO, Real Estate and Infrastructure Investments, Mubadala. And the memento will be given by, again, the chairman, CA Krishnan sir, vice chairman, CA Rohit sir. And behind every successful man, there is a woman. So let me welcome Mrs. Radha Sridhar as well. And all of you can witness a smile on Sridhar sir's face, which we don't get to see in usual events. Thank you so much. Wonderful. And now I request our chief guest, Milind sir, to kindly give a memento to our membership team members, CA Suma Rajesh and CA Shafiq Nilayal. They've taken a lot of effort, so the least we can do is just an applause. Thank you, sirs. Thank you so much. And now, just a quick brief after lunch, what happens next. So the early bird raffle draw will be soon after lunch. Lunch will be for a duration of 45 minutes, because we are running a little delay in time. And then we also have the panel discussion, the art of winning business, a lesson from the world, and evolving defense and space technologies. So all of this will be after lunch. The lunch duration will be 45 minutes.